Hi guys. Um, I have been trying to do a lot of thinking around this week's or your last week's post, discussion board 9, and I feared making this video because I know I'm going to be tempted to go on a rant. So I'm going to try to rein it in as best I can, but forgive me if I go off a little bit, in whichever direction. So I was really I was interested to read how you all responded to this post. It was a hard question to answer, particularly with respect to equality, and whether or not we've realized this vision of equality that Anita Hill was alluding to in her NPR interview. I couldn't help but just view all of the discussion posts through a different lens. As many of you know, or I might have alluded to before, the online courses are developed every 3 years by UA faculty and staff, and this course was developed about 3 years ago. It's due for a redesign, and I'm hoping I can be a part of that. But I thought it was so interesting that this particular post was designed 3 years ago without any knowledge of what would be going on this week, and we've had these strange coincidences come up before in the class with our discussion posts. But it was really strange this week. With regard to the Reagan-Bush era, economic structure and whether or not things are different now and how they're different. We saw the GOP release their tax plan, their proposal for tax cuts, largely corporate level tax cuts and upper income tax cuts, under the theory of trickle-down economics that was such a presence during the Reagan and Bush years. So we certainly see that those ideals are, continuing now in our current society, and I don't know whether or not that tax plan will actually pass. That is yet to be seen, but keep an eye on that and see what happens there, because if they do manage to pass that tax plan, we're going to really just be reliving that economic policy through the Reagan years. It seems. It certainly seems to be based on those theories. But even more striking to me was the Anita Hill conversation with all that we've seen. Many of you touched on this in your posts with regard to the Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment allegations that are coming forward, and a number of other powerful people that are stepping down from whatever positions in news media, in Hollywood, elsewhere. It's really kind of like a zeitgeist moment where we're seeing women come forward and feel empowered to, tell their stories around these things, which is, in my mind, a very good thing. Yet I also get a bit disheartened to think that so many of these women waited for decades in some of these cases to come forward with these allegations, and they get some pushback from, particular directions where some people might say, why are they waiting and coming out now? They're just capitalizing on a moment, 15 minutes of fame or whatever it is. But I think it also speaks to how hard it is to be a single person speaking out like this. And when other people start to speak out, you kind of don't want to let other people go down and face the criticism that Anita Hill did during the 90s when she was trying to tell her story during those Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. So I think it's encouraging to see that, we're empowered by one another coming forward, and that we want to support one another and, feel like it's the time to tell your story. But then I also think, and this is where I'm getting rambly, so forgive me, it's a good thing I'm not writing the discussion posts with you guys, because I would be taking us off in whatever direction. But I think about just sexual harassment in general in the workplace, and while women are equal in so many respects nowadays, and we talk about the progress that we've made and how we see that, in terms of the education demographics, women are surpassing men in professional schools, yet there's a disconnect there because we see such a large proportion of women achieving on the education side and then not representing in the professional side. And people can point to, different priorities that women may have in terms of, focusing on family, which is quite possibly true. But I worry that that doesn't tell the whole picture, because there are so many mechanisms that are in place, these cultural norms where men promote other men rather than women. And if men are already in those positions of power, it might make it harder for women to break into those high power positions and receive equal pay and equal status. And moreover, for every case of sexual harassment that a woman has to come forward and, make these allegations around, I worry about all the other missed opportunities. Because as a woman, and probably because we have a mostly female class, you guys can probably relate to what I'm saying. I don't know. Patrick, sorry, I'm not trying to call you out. But you probably know women that might relate to this story. But often, you don't have to be sexually harassed to know that you might be putting yourself in a position that could be uncomfortable. And sometimes we sense those uncomfortable situations and self-select out of those situations prior to being in the situation. And that in and of itself makes me kind of angry. The fact that women are having to dodge all of these, bombs in the workplace, essentially, where you don't want to be in the same room with so-and-so because you know that it might put you in a bad position where then you're going to have to be bringing these allegations. I don't know. This is my rant. I'm sorry. I just worry about it from both sides, and I worry about the impact of, just cultural norms around how different genders interact. And I don't think it is the norm. So to say cultural norms might be unfair, because I think that there are more people that are becoming more and more progressive and understanding that equality is the way things should be, and working toward that, and people want that. We don't want to see that women are treated poorly or differently than men in the workplace. I don't believe that. But I think there's enough of a vestige from a former cultural time where those things still take place here and there. There are little pockets of this strangeness out there in the workplace. And I appreciated somebody in their discussion post pointing out the callers from the Anita Hill, NPR conversation, how supportive some of the callers were, and even admitting that they were the critics of Anita Hill at the time during those confirmation hearings and not believing her story. And her character she was totally vilified at the time from more than just the people who wanted Clarence Thomas to be confirmed. I remember, even as a child, when this was going on, having some sense of Anita Hill as being some questionable person. And now as an adult, I look back on that and think, what the heck, there's really, other than the fact that Clarence Thomas had been a very successful man and was in a position of power, and people didn't want to believe that that was what was going on, they pointed to her character flaws rather than his, which was really unfortunate. And we see that she's gone on to, continue to fight her fight, and people are now realizing that her character was probably not the problem, and calling in to say as such, which was nice. I was happy to hear that. Yet it does make you wonder, how many times we're going to do this again in the future. I'm trying to keep a positive outlook, so I should end with something more positive, like the fact that there are so many women coming out and trying to speak up against these injustices in the workplace, and hopefully setting a new standard for future generations where that will be the norm and you won't be met with criticism about your own personal characteristics and, pointing to your own personal flaws when you try to say, hey, somebody else did this and it was not okay. Maybe we'll set a different standard for equality going forward. I hope. But I'll stop rambling now. Thanks for putting up with me this week, guys. I've been stewing in this all week, thinking about these posts, and I don't know. I hope that maybe we can try to cap all of this off at the end of the semester with something really positive. I'm hoping we'll have some really good current event news to discuss so that we can all go into the holidays feeling good about it. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Remember, in terms of housekeeping issues, the Module 10 discussion that you guys are working on now, you can address each of those 3 posts and then respond to one individual on each of those 3 posts. So your responses would only have to be 3 rather than 6, 2 for each response, or 2 for each post. I hope you know what I'm saying. 3 responses in total. And if you don't feel up to taking that Module 10 quiz because there's a high workload right now, that's fine. Or you can hold on to that free quiz pass and just kind of apply it to your lowest grade at the end of the semester, whatever you feel is best for you. If it were me, I'd go ahead and take the quiz, given that you've done some of the reading, and, if you don't do well, you can always drop it. Or if you do well and, great, you have that free pass later to apply to a different quiz. All right, I hope everyone's doing well, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye, guys.